You have some very interesting businesses that led you to this point.
Yeah. So the first business was breeding albino iguanas in my parents' basement.
How do you do that?
Well, I just found...
explain the process to Jack.
I found one for sale online, and then at one point I had every known heterozygous for albinism iguana on the planet. And so I was not great at it, and I was not that much of a businessman, but I just thought it'd be super cool. So we had 36 6-foot-long lizards in cages in my parents' basement. I must have been 14 or so, and kind of did it through high school. Well, sold some of them, didn't make a ton of money, but learned a lot about, how you run a business, what accounting looks like, how you'd manage the books. And, the fact that, obviously they only reproduce once a year. And so you'd have to plan for, this is how much I might make, and this is how much it takes to keep it all going.
How much were they?
They were at that point between $5,000 and $6,000 each.
What?
Yeah. And so obviously the ones that aren't albino but carry the gene, the heterozygous ones, were a lot less valuable. And so we were able to, make some. And I ended up selling the whole lot of it as I went off to college to not Tiger King, but one of his friends. He was actually in one of the opening scenes of Tiger King. I'm like, there he is. And I hadn't talked to him in years, but he moved them all down to Florida. They were a little more prolific when able to live outside. As everybody in Florida knows, there's iguanas at every underpass.
How do you get the first iguana, though? Like, how did that start to get like an albino of that?
Well, I had a pet one for a while. And so, and it was awesome, a great pet. And I always thought, oh, more reptiles. And I mean, as soon as I learned that you could have dinosaurs that fit in cages, I was sold on it as a kid. And so we had all sorts of weird stuff. And my parents were very overly indulgent in those kinds of ridiculous obsessions. And so I learned a lot from them about, some of the crazy things that were out there in the world. I mean, we were not wealthy by any stretch, but they were able to, show me like, hey, this is that. And they weren't car people either. So I wasn't out wrenching with dad in the garage. This was something that I really, not until I could drive, I became obsessed with. And so just growing up and reading as much as I could and researching how businesses worked, because I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background or family. They had no idea, but they just were like, oh, well, this seems like a reasonable experiment for you to try and learn and fail and figure it out. So I don't know if that's, skill or luck or whatever, but it was always just like trying to figure out how to throttle and how to understand the risks involved with whatever it was you were trying to do.
What was the profit margin of that whole business?
Well, what you look at, you have no real cost in the egg, but, when you can sell something for, $1,000 to $10,000, the problem was always figuring out the profitability afterwards and deciding if it was actually even worthwhile. And that's the way all farming works. Now, this is a very peculiar example of farming, but you watch Clarkson's farm and they don't know if they're making money until long after a harvest and sale and figuring out all the logistics. And so the same was true for my next real business, I suppose, which was much more legitimate than that, but was in college, I started an exotic car rental company. And, you see so much on YouTube about people renting cars out on Turo and doing all these other things to try to make their car payments and stuff like that. But in 2006, when I was after my sophomore year at Georgia Tech, that was a time when you could still get stated income loans for exotic cars. So as a 20-year-old, you just fill out the application and tell them what you thought you were going to make, and they would approve stuff. And so I bought my first Lamborghini at 20 years old. I didn't have enough money to make the first payment and immediately started a rental car company. And with that, the same issue was true. You couldn't tell if you were actually making money really until you sold the car. You could generate revenue, you could get the cars out and make money, but you didn't know when they were going to break catastrophically. You didn't know how much they were going to depreciate. And so you knew, what you had to make all your payments and pay all your bills each month, but you never really knew how profitable the business was, at least until tax time, and a lot of times until you actually disposed of the vehicle.
Although really quick, before we go into that, even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars, molecular medicine, to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast.
But of course, the problem is that AI requires a ton of speed and computing power, so how can you compete without costs spiraling out of control?
That's why it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or our sponsor, OCI.
OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all of your AI and machine learning workloads.
OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a ton of money. Not to mention, thousands of businesses have have already upgraded to OCI, including MGM Resorts, Specialized Bikes, and Fireworks AI. And right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half when you move to OCI. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, and the offer ends December 31st, 2024. So see if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/iced. Again, that's oracle.com/iced with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, Oracle, for sponsoring this podcast. And now let's get back to the episode.